Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to talk to you about the second part of my birth story. The first part that I put up yesterday was all about my labor and giving birth and a little bit of complications that happened with me as far as bleeding. And so if you haven't seen that, maybe go check that out. It should be, I think it's right here. I think that's all I've got to say. So let's get into it. I left off saying that he was having breathing issues, and the collaborating doctor that works with my midwife decided and told us that he should be transferred to a hospital. So, because we had him at a birth center. So at that point, the collaborating doctor advised us that if we drove him by car, because it wasn't a super emergency, it's not like he had stopped breathing, he was still breathing, he was just having a little bit of trouble doing it. And so she advised us that if we traveled in our personal vehicles to the hospital, that because he had left medical care at that point, he would be considered like, you know, tainted or dirty at that point. And so if he did have an issue and needed to be admitted into the NICU, he would not be able to be admitted into the NICU because he had left medical care, basically. He could still get admitted into the pediatrics unit, but he would not be able to get admitted into the NICU. So she advised that we go ahead and call an ambulance and be transferred via an ambulance. So the ambulance came, and me and Cooper loaded up into the ambulance. He was in his car, we got his car seat, had him strapped into his car seat, and they took him in the ambulance in his car seat, and I rode in the ambulance with him. Sean wasn't, you can only have one person in the ambulance, so Sean wasn't able to ride in the ambulance with us. He followed behind us in our personal car. Normally they transfer to a hospital that everyone knows, the birth center. They get transferred all the time. Unfortunately, that hospital had an insane amount of babies. There was no rooms left in the NICU or anything like that. So they said that unless it's life or death, that they would transfer us to another hospital anyway. So just go ahead and go to the other hospital. So we went to a different hospital. This hospital had never had a transfer from the birth center before. So when the ambulance got there, they took us to the emergency room, and we went into the emergency room, and no one really knew what to do with us. We were a transfer from a birth center, so he wasn't born there, so they weren't sure what they were supposed to do with us, basically. Do they admit him into the emergency room? Do they admit him into, you know, like the labor and delivery room? Do they send him to the NICU? What do they do? Do they send him to pediatrics? So it took probably about 30 to 45 minutes in the emergency room. Of course, we knew they had him hooked up to an oxygen reading machine during all this, so we knew that he wasn't, you know, he was still getting, you know, an adequate amount of oxygen, all that kind of stuff. But it was a little bit frustrating having to wait that long to try to figure out what was going on, what we needed to do. At this point, it was about midnight. He was born he was born at 8:13. I would say around 8. He was born at 8:13. So finally, a nurse from the NICU comes down and says that we're going to be taken up to labor and delivery and admitted into a postpartum room, and that she would take us up there. So she takes us up there and puts us in a postpartum room. Everything is fine. Gets us settled in, says that she's going to take him back to the NICU to do his labs, just to do a blood draw. They said that's just standard in something like his situation, that they would draw his blood. So they, I was very much postpartum at this point, had lost more blood than I should have. I just wasn't, and I was still bleeding quite a bit, obviously. And so I just decided to stay in the room and have Sean go to the NICU with him, and stay with him while they took his labs. They took him back and did that. It only took, you know, a few minutes. They brought him back. Sean said everything was great. That they asked if they could give him sugar water. Sean said yes, which I agreed with. We hadn't talked about that, but I would have made the same decision that he did. So it's kind of, it helps with the pain. So he said he didn't even cry when he had his blood drawn. That he was just a super a super champ. So then we hang out in our postpartum room. At this point, you know, it's like 4 in the morning. It's and you know, we didn't sleep. We were both up. We were very tired, but we stayed awake, just kind of loving on our new baby and trying to figure the whole parenting thing out. So around 5 a.m. a nurse comes in. She came in and said that his labs had come back and that he was being admitted into the NICU. So at that point, I wasn't like hysterical frantic, but I started crying. I was very upset. No mom wants to hear that that there's something wrong with their baby and that they're being admitted into the intensive care unit. That's just not what you want to hear. We were told, you know, that basically you can't stay in his NICU room with him. You can visit him 24/7. You can stay as long as you want, but you can't sleep in his room. You can't eat in his room. And you're basically just visiting. There's not like a bed in there or anything like that. There's just like a little chair next to his, where his little cradle is. So that happened. We were really confused. We didn't know what to do with his breathing while we were admitted. What was really going on. They said that it was an infection is what they thought that they were admitting him for, but we were really just we were very confused about why he was being admitted to the NICU. Obviously we knew there was something wrong, but we weren't really sure about exactly what was going on. I stayed in his NICU room with him until 10 a.m. the next morning when the doctor came in, the NICU doctor. And he came in to talk to us. He was doing his rounds and explained to us that the reason he was admitted to the NICU had nothing to do with his breathing. He was not concerned about his breathing, but he thought that, you know, it was, you know, glad that we came to get it checked, but it was, you know, happens to a lot of babies, and that the breathing wasn't a concern for him, and that it would clear up within a few days, and that had zero reason to do with why he was admitted into the NICU. So we were like, okay, so why are we here? And it turned out that Cooper had some kind of infection they were able to find through his blood based on his blood counts and a couple other inflammation markers and things like that, that they found that he had some sort of infection. They weren't sure where the infection was. Are you gonna talk to the camera? Oh. Let's see if I can reach your binky. Do you want your binky? I know. So they weren't sure exactly where the infection was or anything at that point. They couldn't really tell us much other than that they were sure that there was some infection somewhere. They said that basically they will rerun his lab, I believe it was the next morning, and see kind of where it was at. But at that point they said that there was clearly an infection and they wanted to begin with intensive antibiotic treatment basically. And so he was getting a lot of antibiotics through his IV. I basically didn't leave his side. The doctor was really concerned and they wanted to do I think the technical term is a spinal puncture. Basically it's a spinal tap to check for meningitis and make sure that he didn't have meningitis. At that point we were hoping that we would leave within like 2 or 3 days at the most. They said that we would hopefully be able to leave. At that point he said that if the spinal tap comes back positive, that we will be there for at least 2 to 3 weeks, and if it comes back negative, that he'll still keep us there for a minimum of 5 days. It was a little bit devastating. It was more than a little bit devastating. My heart hurt for my son who was being poked and prodded and having blood draws and IVs, and he was hooked up to all kinds of cords everywhere on him, on his feet, and had little, the stickers on his chest, and it was just really hard to see him like that. He couldn't put like shirts on and stuff because he had the IV in his hand. And then to find out they were going to do the spinal tap, it was more than me and my husband's heart could bear. Basically, we were a mess waiting for the results. It took a couple hours for the results, and they came back negative that he did not have meningitis. Thank God. I can't imagine. We continued to do the antibiotic treatment. They still felt very confident that he had some infection somewhere, had a good little grip on him. Basically, they continued the antibiotic treatment. I don't think there was anything crazy eventful after that. At the end of the day, you talking? We were in the NICU for 5 days. By then, at the end of the 5 days, his labs, his blood draws came back that there was no longer an infection. We got to leave with our baby. So we just thank our lucky stars that he's okay and that I was okay. And alright guys, I think that is it. Oh, I love when he does his stretches. Can you see his face? Oh, so cute. So cute, Cooper. So cute. He's almost 8 weeks old. Alright guys, so I think that's the end of Cooper's, the second part of our birth story. More of the Cooper's story. Whatever the infection was, they beat it. Oh, that's what I was going to tell you guys, was that when he was today he was discharged, I asked his NICU doctor, so do we know where the infection was, like, or, you know, and they said no, and they said, you know, you'll probably never know where it was, but that's not really important. What's important is that it's gone, wherever it was coming from, it's not there anymore, basically. So, I don't know where exactly it was, but it's gone, so that's what really matters. So, alright guys, don't forget to subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, comment, just kind of do all the things, and I will see you guys in the next video, and I hope y'all have a blessed day, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye guys!